إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. الحمد لله. وقال الشيخ الإمام العلامة شيخ الإسلام موفق الدين القدامى المقدسي رحمه الله في كتابه المبارك لمعة اعتقاد الهادي لسبيل الرشاد ومن كلام الله سبحانه القرآن العظيم وهو كتاب الله المبين وحبله المتين وصراطه المستقيم. Alhamdulillah, we are looking at our unit, which is unit 3, the attribute of the noble Qur'an, في صفة القرآن الكريم, and this is the 15th of Dhul-Qa'dah 1444. So if we start from the speech.
And from the speech of Allah, glorified and exalted, is the Grand Qur'an. It is the clear book of Allah and His weighty matter, His straight path, the revelation, or the Lord of all creation.
Okay, so that shouldn't be or, this should be of, right? So that's a typo. So when it's referenced that it is the clear book, وهو كتاب الله المبين, right? It's the clear book, وحبله المتين, His weighty matter, وصراطه المستقيم, His straight path, and the revelation, وتنزيل رب العالمين, right? His straight path, the revelation of the Lord of all creation. Now, his statement, نزل به الروح الأمين على قلب سيد المرسلين بلسان عربي مبين. That section is actually a paraphrase of Surah Al-Shu'ara, the 26th Surah, ayat 192 to 194, depending on the qira. I'm thinking column.
It was brought down by the trustworthy spirit on the heart of the master of the messengers in the clear Arabic tongue, sent down and not created.
Okay, so it is منزل غير مخلوق منه بدأ وإليه يعود, right? So it was sent down and not created. So تنزيل, نزل, wahi, this references the fact that it was sent down. It wasn't created. It's not the work of a creation. It's not the work of human beings. It's not the work of malaika. It's not the work of jinn.
It has come from Him, and to Him it will return.
وهو سور محكمات وآيات مبينات وهو حروف وكلمات.
The Qur'an, is decisive surahs, clear verses, letters and words.
Okay, so it's decisive surahs, clear ayat, letters and words. So it is this revelation we're making reference to. من قرأه فأعربه فله بكل حرف 10 حسنات.
Whoever should recite it doing so correctly, he possesses 10 rewards for each letter.
له أول وآخر وأجزاء وأبعاد.
It has a beginning and an end, subdivisions and parts.
Okay, so by saying so, it's making reference to the fact that the beginning of the Quran is Al-Fatiha and its end is An-Nas. Right? It has ajza, right, meaning 30 juz, and ab'ad, and it has parts. So there's hizb. So the Sahaba used to recite in hizb, right? Early generations recite in hizb or ajza. They would do khatam of it as a regular habit, and they were agreed that in terms of its arrangement, Surah Al-Fatiha is the first surah that goes there, and Nas is in the back. Now this is an important point. There's a distinction between the rasam of the Quran and the wird of the Quran. The rasam of the Quran is split into two things. The rasam is split into two things. The first is that the rasam references, number one, how the Quran is written down in terms of the letterings. And the order in which it was revealed. The order in which the Qur'an was revealed, it makes Surah Al-Alaq, the 96th surah, that's the first surah. The second surah, Surah Al-Qalam. Third surah is Muzammil. Fourth is Al-Muddathir. And fifth is Al-Fatiha. Right, that's the order of revelation. The final surah is إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. That's the final surah that was given. The second is of the rasam is the order that it's arranged in. The order that it's arranged in is what the first generation of companions understood in terms of where it belongs. So this is Fatiha in the beginning, Nas at the end. We know that where the surahs are supposed to be in the ayat, because the Rasulullah alayhi salatu wassalam, in a hadith on Bukhari's collection, he would ask about, you know this ayah and this ayah? And they would say yes. And he would say, the ayat that's just been given to me, put it between these. And he would have them write it down, and when they read it, he said, well, now recite it to me. And he did this with Zayd ibn Thabit, Muawiyah, all the 70 scribes he had. He listened to them recite the Qur'an, but he was watching out for not just proper recitation, but the rasam, the order that the surahs were in, where it belonged. Okay. The next is the wird of the Qur'an. So the wird of the Qur'an is how people might personally recite the Qur'an, how they might choose to do khatams or recite it. So Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he has his own wird. He had his own wird how he used to set up. And so his mushaf, the mushaf of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, they said, oh, well, he doesn't have قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ and قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ in his wird of Qur'an. Well, yes, because he recites it daily in his salah, because it's the sunnah to recite it in the 2 rak'ah before Fajr, and also in the 2 rak'ah that you do after Maghrib. So because those were so regularly done, he didn't include it in his mushaf as being part of what he does khatam of, because he does khatam of those surahs so regularly, right? So that's his wird. People who might arrange or gather together Surah Al-Kahf, right? They'll put together in a wird collection Kahf, Hamim, As-Sajda, Yasin, the more oft recited surahs, they'll put those in. That's like a wird, right? Now that wird is, you have surahs from the Qur'an, but it's not the Qur'an, because by Qur'an we mean the entirety of the mushaf what's been written, right? And because of that, one is required to have wudu whenever touching the mushaf with their bare hands, right? But in the case of if it's just a surah or some ayat, they're not required to. It's noble if they make wudu and touch it, but they're not required. Why? Now this is the understanding of most scholars. Why? Well, because the Rasulullah, when he sent letters, when we learned the seerah, when he sent out letters, he sent one letter to the emperor of Persia. It had an ayah from the Qur'an in it and the basmalah, and it was handed over to him to have. Yet he wasn't required to read it. Muqawqis, he didn't have wudu. He wasn't Muslim, right? But he read it, right? So understanding these principles, it's not required. Now, if somebody, let's say they have a mushaf, let's say someone has a mushaf in his bag, is someone required to have wudu if he's carrying the mushaf in his bag? Let's say he broke the wudu while he's carrying his bag. No, he's not required to have it at that point, because he's carrying the mushaf. But if he wants to touch it, recite from it, yes, he would. If it has a leather-bound cover or a back on it, and he can open it, and he can move it without touching the pages, this is permitted. In the case of ladies that are having their monthly cycle, if they're reviewing their Qur'an, or they're reciting ayat that they've already memorized as a wird, like the quls before bed and things like that, they're not required to have wudu for that. But if you're talking about memorizing, well, yeah, they can't because they're in a state of junub. You're talking about memorizing? No, you can't because you're in a state of junub. Right? These principles make us understand that the Qur'an is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's His revelation, and His speech is one of His attributes. And by seeing that, knowing that, oh, you have to have wudu. If you're junub, you can't do that. That makes you realize that there's something about this that sets it apart from, say, if you just narrated a hadith. Right? If you narrate a hadith, you're not required to have wudu. Right? If you did so, that's noble, but you're not required. Right? Because we have the narrative of Imam Malik radiallahu anhu, where if someone asked him about the hadith, he would make ghusl, he'd wrap his amama, he'd put on his best clothes, he would burn incense, he'd do these things, sit on narrate hadith. That's noble, but it's not required, where someone wouldn't bear sin if they did. But if someone recited while they're junub, recite a Qur'an while they're in the state of junub, they would incur sin because they're told that no one should recite from it unless they're tahir. Right? This is in the Muwatta, it's in other collections. So we see that the Qur'an, these two things, the rasam and the wird of the Qur'an. مطلوع بالألسنة مطلوع بالألسنة محفوظ في الصدور مسموع بالآذان مكتوب في المصاحف فيه محكم متشابه وناسخ منسوخ وخاص وعام وأمر ونهي.
It is recited by tongues, preserved in the hearts, heard by the ears, and written in the collected pages. It has passages that are decisive and allegorical, abrogating and abrogated, specific and general, order and the prohibition.
Okay, so within the Qur'an are different classes of ayat. Right? Some are decisive, muhkamat. Muhkamat are ayat where you have commands and they're clear in their commands. Allegorical, I've translated from mutashabihat. That's the closest thing I could find in English. It doesn't really capture mutashabihat, but that's what I found. So in some in the distribution printing of this, I've just put mutashabi back in because I felt the allegorical doesn't fully capture it. Abrogating and abrogated. So there's some ayat in the Qur'an that abrogate other ayat because something was in effect at a time. Like Nabiyyuna Ibrahim alayhi salam, his shart was in effect. And so because of certain things, the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam did certain things or declared certain things by revelation where it abrogated previous things. Listen, no, you no longer adhere to this principle. Or things were in vogue at the time and were known at the time, but were negated by revelation. Right? Specific khas, there's certain ayat in which they're specific for a certain circumstance. If this happens, you must be sure to do this. General, am, these are ayat in which there's a general statement, right? وَإِذَا حَلَلْتُمْ فَاصْطَادُوا. So when you have come out of ihram, then you may go hunting, right? So that's a general statement. Once you've come out of ihram, now you can return to most of what you had been. That's a general ayah. Orders, amr, right? A command, right? أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. Establish the salah, right? That's a command. Prohibition, right? حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ, right? It's forbidden for you, me found dead, right? These are prohibitions and things that exist. لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه تنزيل من حكيم حميد.
No falsehood comes from before or behind it. It is revelation from the most wise, the worthy of praise. This is Surah Al-Fussilat, 41st Surah, Ayah 42.
وقوله تعالى قل إن اجتمعت الإنس والجن على أن يأتوا بمثل هذا القرآن لا يأتون بمثله ولو كان بعضهم لبعض ظهيرا.
And there are the words of the Exalted One. Say, if the whole of humanity and jinn were to gather together to come with the like of this Qur'an, they could not do so, even if they helped one another. Surah Al-Isra, 17th Surah, Ayah 88.
وهذا هو الكتاب العربي الذي قال فيه الذين كفروا.
It is this very Arabic book which the unbelievers said about it.
لن نؤمن بهذا القرآن.
We will never believe in this Qur'an. Surah Saba, the 34th Surah, Ayah 31.
وقال بعضهم
And some of them said,
إن هذا إلا قول البشر.
this is just the words of a human being. Surah Al-Mudaththir, the 74th Surah, Ayah 25.
فقال الله سبحانه سأصليه سقر.
So Allah said, They shall be burned in the fire.
Okay, now this is a typo. It should be سأصليه سقر. I shall certainly burn him in the fire. Okay, that's a typo. Now, for this, سأصليه سقر, I've translated in the fire. Now, the particular word in Arabic used as saqar, this is a part of the fire that no one may exit from. And this might be a useful point to mention here. The name of the name of the place of judgment and punishment is Jahannam. Jahannam. Okay? That's its proper name. But if it mentions, when the Qur'an, when it mentions someone going to Jahannam or going to the Nar, it doesn't mean that they'll never get out. It doesn't mean they'll never get out unless Allah qualifies it, either by expressions like Khalidina fiha abada, to be forever therein, or if he says certain names, because certain names like the Saqar is a part of the fire that no one gets out of. How do we know that? Because when Allah has used the word Saqar, He's qualified it by saying Khalidina fiha, or they'll never ma hum bi kharijina min an-nar, they'll never get out of it. The Rasulullah said in the hadith that whoever has abandoned Salah shall be resurrected with a Fir'aun, Haman, and Umayyah bin Khalaf. I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, they're not getting out of the fire. Right. So it makes you understand that, wait a minute, those Umayyah bin Khalaf's kafir, Fir'aun is kafir, okay, Haman is kafir, wait a minute, subhanallah, right? When you start understanding that, oh, Allahu Akbar, right? Then you look in Surah Al-Mudaththir, when the Malaika asked the people that were in the fire, مَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرٍ, what caused you to be in the Saqar? Their first surprise, أَلَمْ نَكُمْ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ, we didn't used to make salah. It's like, wait a minute, what? Right? So you start realizing this is places people won't get out of. Jahim, right? Ayat that's revealed that they'll never get out of the Jahim, right? Now there are 7 gates to Jahannam, 7 gates, which later on, inshallah, we'll go through the 7 gates and the different ayat that establish which ones people. But in general, if it lists someone's going to Jahannam, it doesn't necessarily mean, because we know that there are believers that will go into the fire, that will exit out, right? So when you look at Surah An-Naba, the 78th surah, لَابِثِينَ فِيهَا أَحْقَابًا, they shall dwell therein for ages. That doesn't mean forever, though. That's one of the ayat that you'll use to say, that doesn't mean people are permanently therein. Why? That means no one's ever in there? No. It means that the people that are going in there, that some of those people will come out, right? And there are other ayat that also establish that not everyone that goes in there is in permanence. وقال بعضهم هو شعر فقال الله تعالى وما علمناه شعر ما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين.
Some of them said that it is poetry, but Allah said, we have neither taught him poetry, nor is it right that he do so, but it is only a remembrance and a clear Qur'an. So Surah Yasin, 36 Surah Ayah 69.
فلما نفى الله عنه أنه شعر وأثبته قرآنا لم يبقى شبهة الذي لب في أن القرآن هو هذا الكتاب العربي الذي هو حروف وكلمات وآيات.
Thus when Allah negates that it is poetry and affirms that it is a Qur'an, there remains no doubt for anyone with intelligence that the Qur'an is this very Arabic book, which has letters, words, and verses.
لأن ما ليس كذلك لا يقول أحد إنه شعر وقال الله تعالى.
If this were not the case, no one would have denied it by saying it is poetry. The Mighty and Majestic has said,
وإن كنتم في ريب مما نزلنا على عبدنا فأتوا بسورة من مثله وادعوا شهداءكم من دون الله.
And if you are in doubt regarding what we have sent down to our slave, then bring a surah like it and call upon your witnesses besides Allah. Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd Surah, Ayah 23.
ولا يجوز أن يتحداهم بالإتيان بمثل ما لا يدرى ما هو ولا يعقل وقال الله تعالى.
It is not possible that he would challenge them to bring the likeness of that which they neither knew about nor could come to know. So the Exalted One has said,
وإذا تتلى عليهم آياتنا بينات قال الذين لا يرجون لقاء نأت بقرآن غير هذا أبدله قل ما يكون لي أن أبدله من تلقاء نفسي.
And when our clear signs are recited to them, those who do not hope to meet us say, bring a Qur'an other than this or replace it. Say, it is not for me to replace it from my own accord. Surah Yunus, the 10th Surah, Ayah 15.
So understand, the Quraysh, when the Rasulullah is reciting this Qur'an to them, they know exactly what it is. They know what they're hearing. They're like, oh no, it's bring the Qur'an, but something besides this. We don't want this. The fact that they can comprehend and understand the revelation means that it means a number of things. First of all, it means there are aspects to the Qur'an that are common to everyone, whether you're Muslim or Kafir, that everyone can understand. Statements about Allah's oneness, about the cosmic fact of the day of resurrection, and that all men must give account for themselves. That can be known by a Kafir or a Muslim. Don't be confused that when a Kafir misunderstands the ayat about the cutting of the hand for theft, or they misunderstand the mutashabihat ayat. Oh, it says here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has a hand. Don't be confused by the fact when they misunderstand mutashabihat ayat that they don't understand the mubayyin, like the clear ayat and other things. They have the ability to understand it, because otherwise the Quraysh couldn't have understood it. The Quraysh are clearly telling you that they're denying La ilaha illallah. So they're denying La ilaha illallah because they understand what that entails. And the fact that they understand it is because they turn to each other and say, He's telling us to give up our gods and what we know. We're not giving up Hubal. We're not giving up this. We're not giving up that. Right? So they understand very clearly what exactly is being said. They might misunderstand other ayat or might mock or jeer, but they understand the general content of the message. فأثبت أن القرآن هو الآيات التي تتلى عليهم وقال تعالى.
So he established the Qur'an is the verses that were recited to them. The Exalted One has said,
بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم.
But it is clear signs in the hearts of those who were given knowledge. Surah Al-Ankabut, 29, Surah Ayah 49.
وقال تعالى.
The Exalted One has further revealed,
إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون.
It is a noble Qur'an in a preserved book. No one may touch it but the purified.
And the surah?
Surah Al-Waqi'ah, the 56th Surah, Ayah 77 to 78.
This is one of the evidence that one must have wudu in order to touch the Qur'an. Because the Rasulullah, with respect to this ayah in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, he said, this means that someone doesn't come near the Qur'an unless he's tahir, and he meant tahir in the sense of bearing wudu. بعد أن أقسم على ذلك وقال تعالى.
After that he swore to that being his speech. The Exalted One has said,
كاف ها يا عين صاد.
Kaf ha ya ayn sad. Surah Maryam, the 19th Surah, Ayah 1.
حميم عين سين قاف.
Ha mim ayn sin qaf. Surah Shura, the 2nd Surah, Ayah 1.
وافتتح 29 سورة بالحروف المقطعة. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
And he has opened some 29 surahs with the disjointed letters. The Prophet ﷺ said,
من قرأ القرآن فأعربه فله بكل حرف منه 10 حسنات ومن قرأه ولحن فيه فله بكل حرف حسنة.
Whoever should recite the Qur'an then does so correctly, for every letter he has 10 rewards. And whoever recites it with difficulty, then for every letter he has 1 reward. So this is taken from, this is an authentic hadith.
حديث صحيح. قال الدومي منهم الإمام أحمد وأبو يعلى الموصلي والخرائطي في مساوئ الأخلاق والطبراني والحاكم والضياء المقدسي في المختارة عن عبد الله بن أنيس الأنصاري رضي الله عنهم أجمعين.
Ad-Dumi said, and from among them is the Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Abu Ya'la al-Mawsili, al-Kharaiti in Musawi al-Akhlaq, al-Tabarani, al-Diya' al-Maqdisi in al-Mukhtara, from the narrative of Abdullah ibn Unais al-Ansari.
Okay, so this hadith that he quoted, whoever should recite the Qur'an then does so correctly, for every letter he has 10 rewards. Whoever recites it with difficulty, then for every letter he has 1 reward. Then the Imam just says, this is a Sahih hadith. Well, Imam Ad-Dumi, he gives you the takhrij for the hadith, telling you that it was collected by Imams Ahmad, Abu Ya'la al-Mawsili, al-Kharaiti, al-Tabarani, and then he mentions the Al-Din al-Maqdisi. Why? Because he's from the Muhaqqiqeen, and when he says, listen, this is Sahih, his word counts. Him and Zahabi, they say it's Sahih. So he's doing this to show this is the takhrij of where it's come from. Certain ahadith are so popular that they don't require it. And we'll see this later in the text, where sometimes there's certain ahadith, they're so well known that Ad-Dumi, he doesn't even comment because they're above reproach, they're unimpeachable. But for certain ahadith that aren't as well known but are sahih, he will mention the takhrij of the given hadith. وقال عليه الصلاة والسلام,
He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam also said,
اقرأوا القرآن قبل أن يأتي قوم يقيمون حروفه إقامة السهم لا يجاوز تراقيهم يتعجلون أجره ولا يتأجلونه.
Recite the Qur'an before a people come who establish its letters in place, but it does not go past their throats. They hasten for its reward, but they receive no reward.
Okay, now this is collected by Ahmad as Musnad, volume 5, pages 337 to 338. Now this hadith is one of the hadiths about the Khawarij, who establish the letters, right, in place, but it doesn't go past their throats. They hasten for its reward, but they receive no reward, because they're trying to establish what they perceive of the Qur'an and not following its rules and its guidelines. So it's one thing to establish the letters. It's one thing to have the proper tajweed, but it's quite another to establish what's been written and what's been revealed, to give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala his rights and to give the creation their rights according to what Allah has given. وقال أبو بكر وعمر رضي الله عنهما إعراب القرآن يحب إلينا من حفظ بعض حروفه.
The companions Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma said, correct recitation of the Qur'an is more beloved to us than memorizing some of its letters.
Now, the sense of this, the content of this is not that you should just focus on tajweed and not memorize the Qur'an. No, this statement's tempered with the fact that correct recitation is more beloved before you memorize some of its letters. Because if you have correct tajweed of the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you say, oh, I've not memorized much, that's okay, because you can always build on that. But if you have done a lot of memorization, but the tajweed is extremely compromised, then it becomes more difficult, because we've got to go back and fix it, especially if it's been years and years of you doing so and reciting it. Let's say it's been 10 years of you reciting Surah Qaf without tajweed. Well, now it's going to be a harder prospect of cleaning up Surah Qaf, not because you didn't have intention, not because Allah's not rewarded. No, you will be rewarded, but because you did not do this, there's these other situations that come into play. That's why before someone considers hifz, they should think about, okay, let's make sure to learn the rules of tajweed. Because of all the 18 sciences of the deen, tajweed is actually the easiest of them to learn, and you can learn the rudiments to the intermediate level in a fairly short amount of time. It's not like the ahkam of tajweed aren't the same as, say, ahkam al-Qur'an or ulum al-hadith. That's a far more involved. There's got to be other conditions. There's kutub that you have to have done before you can alter. But with tajweed, to learn that, you can do it in a fairly short period of time. That's the beauty about that particular ilm. وقال علي رضي الله عنه من كفر بحرف منه فقد كفر به كله.
There is a statement of the companion Ali radiallahu anhu, whoever disbelieves in one letter, then he has disbelieved in all of it.
واتفق المسلمون على عد سور القرآن وآياته وكلماته وحروفه.
The Muslims have made consensus upon the surahs of the Qur'an, its verses, words and letters.
Okay, so the Muslims have made consensus on the contents of the Quran. How many surahs are in it? How many ayat? How many letters? Right? So Imam al-Ulaymi, for example, in Fath al-Rahman, in his tafsir, before each surah, he will give a word count, letter count, and ayat count. And then he'll give another count where he'll say, now, if you count the shaddas, it's this many. But if you don't count the shaddas, letters, it's this many. If you count the natural meds, it's this many. If you don't, it's this many. Then as he's going through, he'll say, now this can be read in this fashion, right? Baldatam mayita, or you can have baldatam mayita. It's like you can have. So if you do that, that'll mean there's an extra letter. So people have gone through and already examined, documented, and recorded all these things. ولا خلاف بين المسلمين في أن من جحد من القرآن سورة أو آية أو كلمة أو حرف متفقا عليه أنه كافر.
There is no difference of opinion between the Muslims in that whoever denies a surah, verse, word or letter that is agreed upon is an unbeliever.
وفي هذا حجة قاطعة على أنه حروف.
This is a clear and decisive proof on that the Qur'an, its letters.
Okay, so it shows that this is the same revelation that we received. It's the same information. The fact that we can use the kuffar as a hujjah in the time that received it, that they heard the ayat and like, no, we don't accept that. That means that that revelation that they got, that they heard, that was the Qur'an. Because they said, we don't want this Qur'an. Replace it and bring another one. The kuffar themselves are like, no, we don't want it. And the fact of the matter is that, again, I've mentioned this before, but I think it is a very useful thing to keep in mind. Most of your hadith narrators from the companions and the people that have recorded the history from the companions, most of them were enemies. And these were people that witnessed miracles, like Abu Sufyan al-Sakhr ibn Harb. He narrates a hadith. He became Muslim on the day of the conquest. Now, he witnessed angelic incidents at the battles of Badr and Uhud. He saw it, but he just attributed it to magic. But the fact that he mentions seeing malaika hitting people and flashes of light coming out of them, or people being hit and their faces being burned, that's indicative of an empirical proof, because these are people that they don't have any benefit in recording that truthfully. They're like, no, this is a fact. They don't have any reason. The fact that they saw that, witnessed it, and fought with everything they had against it, only in the end to say, we can't fight anymore because it's been too much. We don't have any more fight in us. To where you have 12,000 people in a city convert en masse to Islam. That is indicative of a proof. Now we come to فصل في رؤية الباري جل جلاله.
Unit 4, seeing the Creator, majestic is as mentioned.
Now you'll notice something about this particular unit. The Imam doesn't mention, he doesn't do any takhrij of the hadiths here. Why? Because the hadith are unimpeachable. And they're so popularly known, it doesn't require. Also, he doesn't give any commentary. He just leaves a chapter. Now this is what you'll find. Whenever an Imam gives a commentary, and he just leaves a chapter or a section blank, that implies assent. That means there's nothing more to say here or to be seen. This is sufficient. So when you see that in a kitab, when you see that in a commentary, we've been through enough kutub where you see, oh yeah, he just left the chapter there. Like, why did he just leave the chapter there? That implies assent. Assent means there's nothing more that needs to be said. The ahadith quote, if there's ahadith quoted there or ayat, these are clear enough to where they don't require elucidation. Right? This section is clear enough where all I do is I assent. Right? I assent. So we take a look through here. وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ يَرَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ بِأَبْصَارِهِمْ وَيَرَوْنَهُ وَيُكَلِّمُهُم وَيُكَلِّمُونَهُ قال الله تعالى.
The believers will see their Lord with their eyes, visit him, and he shall speak to them, and they to him. Allah has said,
وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها ناظرة.
Faces that day will be radiant, looking at their Lord.
وقال تعالى.
The Exalted One has further said,
كلا إنهم عن ربهم يومئذ لمحجوبون.
By no means. That day they will be veiled from their Lord.
Right. Can we give the takhrij for these two ayat as well?
The first, so we've got Surah Al-Qiyamah, the 75th Surah, ayah 22 to 23, and Surah Al-Mutaffifin, the 83rd Surah, ayah 15.
فلما حجب أولئك في حال السخط دل على أن المؤمنين يرونه في حال الرضا وإلا لم يكن بينهما فرق.
So that he veiled these people in a state of wrath is evidence that the believers will see him while in a state of goodness. If this was not the case, there would have been no difference between the two of them.
Okay, now this is actually a statement that the Imam has left here, but this statement is actually a statement taken from Imam Shafi'i. So this is actually a qawl of Imam Shafi'i. So Imam Shafi'i said, the fact that the kuffar are veiled is a proof that the believers will not be veiled. So you have an exact ayah, because this ayah that says, faces that day will be radiant looking at their Lord. Alhamdulillah. So that's a decisive ayah that the believers will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Imam Shafi'i says, but you can also deduce that from this other ayah that says, by no means that day they will be veiled from their Lord. The fact that the kuffar in wrath are veiled from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicative of the fact that also the believers will see him. Otherwise, there's no difference between the two categories. Now, there are some 9 places in the Qur'an where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, him being seen, are mentioned. Okay, this is just one of them, right? So you got Surah Al-Qiyamah, 75th Surah, ayat 22 to 23. Another is Surah Yunus, the 10th Surah, ayat 26. Right, so he mentions that those that will be given, those that show goodness, they'll have goodness with ziyada and something additional. In the hadith of Imam Tirmidhi, the Rasulullah when asked about the ziyada in the ayah, he says, seeing Allah. Right, the hadith in Tirmidhi. And there are 7 other ayat that mention this. So these are texts that are clear. There are numerous ayat. So I said there's 9 ayat, and then the ahadith on this are also in abundance. This issue of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a mutawatir issue. So the ahadith on it are mutawatir. Ayat goes without saying, the mutawatir. It's only some of the Qadiriyah, the Mu'tazila, which the Shia have the Mu'tazila i'tiqad, they deny seeing Allah in the hereafter. And some of the Khawarij. Now, some of the Khawarij, by undermining, they'll start by saying that the Rasulullah didn't see Allah on the Isra wal Mi'raj, which is a way of trying to undercut that the believers seeing Allah. It's undercutting. But the fact of the matter is, which will come up when we discuss the Rasulullah and his rank, but the fact of the matter is, the believers seeing Allah in the hereafter is one of the 4 fruits of salvation. Right? One of the fruits is that you have a direct relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd Surah 186. Inni qareeb, right? So when فَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيب, when my slaves ask you about me, I am near. That's a fruit. That's one of the 4 fruits of salvation. Right? The next is seeing Allah in the hereafter, right? Which we mentioned, Surah Al-Qiyamah, right? Which is mentioned in this chapter. The third is that your sins will be forgiven, and your righteous deeds will be accounted. Right? And one can find this in Surah Al-Layl. Right? And then the fourth is that you'll never be in eternal judgment. The believer never stands in eternal judgment. He'll never be shaqi. He'll never be eternally condemned. We know this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned about the believers in several surahs. رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. The fact that he said رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ, that Allah is pleased with them, means that they're in a state of goodness with him. Even if they in there for a period of time, they are never eternally condemned. But if somebody dies without the iman in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that person stands condemned eternally. We also know this from the hadith of Muslim, where the Rasulullah said, La yadkhulul jannah illa nafsan muslima no soul enters the paradise except a Muslim. So that's indicative of that fact that eternal judgment is guaranteed for those that die without Iman. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إنكم سترون ربكم كما ترون هذا القمر لا تضامون في رؤيته.
The Prophet ﷺ said, "You will see your Lord just as you see this moon, without any difficulty in the vision."
حديث صحيح متفق عليه.
This is an authentic hadith that is agreed upon.
All right, now in hadith, when we discuss in hadith areas, whenever you see the expression muttafaqun alayh, this means agreed upon as sahih by Imams al-Bukhari and Muslim, which means they've both collected the hadith. Now, why is this important? Well, Imams al-Bukhari and Muslim, they both set their own, because they're writing Jami' al-Sahih literature, which is a specific genre of hadith. They've set certain standards. Imam Muslim, one of the standards he set is the ahadith he's collecting are narrated group from group from group. So they'll be mutawatir other than a few words. Bukhari is one from one. Most of it's ahad. So the fact that they both collected the hadith based upon their strict criterion, and they both have agreed upon the same hadith and strict criterion, means that there's no argument about this. That's one of the reasons why Bukhari and Muslim are held in their regard, because they've, in addition to the normal criterion for hadith collection, they've attached their own conditions. And so the fact that the hadith is not only meeting its normal conditions of sahih, but it meets their two conditions, which they have the strictest conditions of all the collectors, means that it's unimpeachable. That's why when the Imam put muttafaqun alayh, it's like you don't even have a discussion on it. We know it's mutawatir, we know it can't be argued with, you know it can't be fought. Right? That's why it's like that. وهذا تشبيه للرؤية بالرؤية لا للمرء بالمرء فإن الله تعالى لا شبيه له ولا نظير.
This is the comparison between the vision of the moon and the other vision, but not between what is seen in the vision of the moon and what is seen in the other vision of Allah. This is because indeed Allah, exalted be He, there is no likeness or equal to Him.
Okay, now this is a very important point. So he said, the hadith, the Imam says, the hadith you should understand is a comparison between the vision of the moon and the other vision, meaning how clear it is. So just as you see this moon without any difficulty in the vision, that's how you'll see Allah. It's not making a tashbih between the moon and Allah. Na'udhu billah. It's making the condition between the clarity. Look how clear that is. Just as much as, na'udhu billah, someone sent me, this was a year ago, they sent me a hadith saying, they didn't even give me salam. They started by making a veiled takfir, and then saying, how can you say that we don't know the meanings of the names and attributes of Allah other than in general, when look at this clear hadith. And the hadith he quoted, now to understand it this way is actually major shirk, but I'm going to quote it and just let it hang there, and I'll give you Qadir Ya'la's understanding. He said, the Rasulullah said that you should know without a doubt that your Lord sees and your Lord hears. And he pointed to his eye and he pointed to his ear. He says, you see, we know what these sifat meant. And I sat there and I was like, this is major shirk. If you understand that hadith, when Rasulullah pointed to his ear, means, and his eye, means a literal eye and a little ear, that's major shirk. It's major shirk. How do we know that? Because Imam Malik, he said, whoever should speak about Allah possessing the attribute of ayn and point to his own eye, and discuss Allah hearing and points to his own ear, he should have his eye gouged out and his ear cut off, so that he understands that Allah is distinct and different to his creation. Al-Qadir Ya'la in Al-Mu'tamid fi usul Mukhtasar fi usul al-Din, he said, when that hadith was quoted, he said, this is the Rasulullah indicating to him indicating his ear and his eye has nothing to do with him discussing the sifa, but it's to do with the fact that they should know that Allah always hears and sees. And no one understands different to this but the Mujassima. This is the situation. So the fact that he sent me that, thinking that was a hujjah in his favor, I was like, this is major shirk. I had to go and wash my eyes. I thought, na'udhu billah. But these are the things that will happen where someone will understand from a hadith something that has nothing to do with another thing. So when you see this hadith where it states, you will see your Lord just as you see this moon, the comparison is the clarity in the vision without any difficulty in the vision. So you know how you see the moon clear? Yeah, we can see it clear. And he mentioned the moon being clear, hadal qamar, the Badr of it, meaning it was on a full moon night. So just as you don't have any problem seeing this, the vision's clear, yeah, it's a full moon, okay, you'll see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, with a clear vision. It won't have any doubt in it. So the Imam says that the comparison is between the vision, الرؤية بالرؤية ولا للمرء للمرء, not that which is seen and what is seen in the other vision, because Allah has no likeness nor equal for him. So this chapter, as I said, is short. He gives ayat from the Qur'an, which is mutawatir. Then he gives you a mutawatir hadith. So the Imam, Abdul Badran, rahimahullah, says, just leaves it as it is because there's nothing more what can you do with mutawatir? And it's muttafaqun alayh. Who doesn't know muttafaqun alayh? Like, that's why he left it like that. So the chapter, he just gives assent to the chapter. Just leave it in there. Ayat are mutawatir. A hadith are mutawatir. There's no argument about the takhrij of the narrators. So just leave it. Right? Now, later commentators upon the Lum'a, because of the decline in knowledge, have commented a little bit more and just, okay, this hadith is found here are the narrators. They've done more, but in general, it tends to be the case that, no, this is established, and that's it. Right? So, inshallah, our niyyah will be next week to look at Unit 5, which is going to be dealing with the topic of Qadr. So we'll be looking at Unit 5, which will take us to the topic of Qadr. And then, inshallah, after that it will be Unit 6, which is Iman. And we'll discuss the distinction between the Iman that enters one in Islam and the Iman of deeds, and why there's an ikhtilaf between Abu Hanifa and the other Imams with regards to that discussion, because you'll hear some of the brothers, if they have knowledge, say that my Iman is like the Iman of the Malaika, or they'll say Iman does not increase and decrease. And you say, wait a minute, hold on. But you'll quote some ayat from the Qur'an and say, right here, it says clearly that the Iman does increase and decrease. What? Right? What's going on? Are they denying the ayat? No, they're not denying the ayat. It's an understanding that has to do with terminology, where you recite the same ayat to them, like, yeah, we know these ayat, but they're in reference to this. So understanding that to help you avoid confrontation, because it's not a confrontation you should really have. When I was in London, in Mahad, this was a really big problem where brothers were sometimes making takfir on other brothers, because it didn't happen with us. But when I was in other circles at the time, because, oh, well, Imam Hanifa is wrong, or the Hanafis, they are wrong. They're in dalal because they're saying Iman doesn't increase and decrease, and that's a lie. No, that's not what they're saying. They're denying the ayats of the Quran are clear. Yeah, we know that. But that's not what they're denying. And sometimes it has to be these types of things. Where, why are you denying the hadith about raising the hands? They're not denying the hadith about raising the hands. This is an understanding that goes back to the first three generations. Once you understand this, debates become far fewer, and you more have conversations about sharing knowledge. That's what it more comes down to, sharing knowledge and exchanging knowledge, which is really what this is about. When you get people that are into debates and everything, it just becomes an issue of, I have to prove this person wrong. The unit on Qadr, I think you will notice, which is Unit 5, that the Imam has no commentary notes on this. Why? Well, because it's all ayat. It is mutawatir things, and the ahadith on the topic are clear and have no dispute about them whatsoever. In addition to that as well, as a habit, Imams are careful when discussing the topic of Qada and Qadr. I will, inshallah, only be discussing terminology that's used in the early generations and after, because we've not been told a lot about Qada and Qadr. How can you give a lengthy commentary about it when we've not been told a lot? Right? This is one of those matters that the data we've been given is pretty much the data that we've been given. Right? So when someone says, well, wait a minute, like someone said to me before, wait a minute, I'm confused. I was like, okay, what is it? Well, it says here, the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, if somebody visits his parents and shows goodness to them, that will increase your rizq. It's like, yeah, that's right. But this other hadith here, it says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set the rizq of everything. It's like, yeah. But I don't understand. Like, neither do I. But they're both true. But what do I do with this? Nothing. You have iman in it. That's all you can do. Because we don't have enough data to come to those conclusions and start making decisions about what should be and what should not. We don't have that data. But we know that these are both true. Now, the increase in risk, could it be that it's making reference to the risk not increasing, but you getting extra blessings in your risk? Maybe. But that's a true statement. But wait a minute. It says here that the ajal, that human beings' ajal it's been written down, that you're going to die when you're going to die. Yeah. But Nabi Musa alayhi salam was told by Malak al-Maut when he put his eye out, when he thought that he was an intruder, that, wait a minute. If you see the wool on this sheep, you can live as much as the wool that this sheep has. You can come with me right now. He was given the choice. And the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before he died, he was given the choice to either stay or go. It's like, yeah, but I don't understand. I know, neither do I. And neither did the people that narrated this. That's why they're left. They're just, yeah, but there's no commentary. Exactly. So our job is to have iman in it, to trust in it. So what do we do with it? We have iman in it. Okay, let me give you the statement of Imam Ahmed again. نُؤْمِنُ بِهَا وَنُصَدِّقُ بِهَا لَا كَيْفَ وَلَا مَعْنَى. We have iman in it. We establish that it's true and affirm it without how, without meaning. That's it. If we had more we could say, we would have. But our job in the Qur'an that we've been made to busy ourselves with is the ayat of ahkam and muhkamat. Those ayat we've been told to busy ourselves with. This is haram. This is halal. That's what we've been told to busy ourselves with. The information of the ghaib, we've not been told to busy ourselves with information of that. We've been told to busy ourselves with iman in it, testifying to it, and striving with righteousness. So we say, يقول قولي هذا استغفر الله لي ولكم واستغفر الله إن الله غفور رحيم حميد رحيم. Now, are there questions of what we've covered so far today? Questions? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. Regarding the comparison between muttafaqun alayh and
other collectors.
The other collectors of Bukhari's genre or way of specifying collecting hadith. Because muttafaqun alayh both means in al-Bukhari and Muslim.
Yes.
If you were to compare a hadith that was muttafaqun alayh and one that wasn't, that was only like mentioned in Muslim or only mentioned in al-Bukhari, would the muttafaqun alayh hadith be considered above that in authenticity because it's in both, or would it still be considered still equal?
Okay, good question. All right, so the question is, a hadith is muttafaqun alayh, that's agreed upon al-Bukhari and Muslim according to both their conditions. Would that hadith be considered of higher rank than one that was merely in al-Bukhari or merely in Muslim alone? Alhamdulillah. Okay, the answer to your question, I must give in two parts. So the first is, the ahadith that are sahih, there are general, the principles of what is a sahih hadith are all clear to all the imams. But Imam al-Bukhari collected his Jami' al-Sahih for a particular purpose in mind. And he set his own conditions. So they have to be one from one, everything else. Imam Muslim set his own conditions for Muslim, in which he said they got to be mutawatir, other than a few words, and so on and so forth. Now, when you have them both collecting the ahadith that are the same wording, and they each have them in their own collections together, that means that these ahadith, if they have met their stringent criterion, which are in addition to the regular criterion, then there's no argument with these hadith of the narrators. But there are individual ahadith in Bukhari that may be of a stronger capacity than the ones in Muslim, because al-Bukhari's criterion were stricter than Muslims. So his narrators, he may have more stringent qualities, and because that an individual hadith there may be stronger than a hadith that's in Muslim. But Muslims' hadith are 9 times out of 10 mutawatir. So it's of the same strength as an ayah. Whereas al-Bukhari might have individually strong hadith, but they're not strong like Muslims, which are mutawatir. They're like an ayah, right? So that's why there'll be these distinctions. So often when imams want to indicate the strength in another collection, like Tabarani has ahadith in it, most of the ahadith in Tabarani are sahih to the degree that meet the conditions of Bukhari, which means Allahu Akbar. Tabarani was like a strict collector. That wasn't the purpose of a mu'jam, but the fact of what he collected and how, and the ahadith for a mu'jam collection, it's like, yeah, these ahadith, they fit the conditions of what al-Bukhari would have considered acceptable. Or when al-Hakim says, this hadith is sahih, but it meets the conditions of al-Bukhari and Muslim. Because al-Hakim wrote his book al-Mustadrak. Now this hadith collection, Imam al-Hakim wanted to show, because there was a confusion in some people's minds that, okay, al-Bukhari and Muslim together, those are hadith are sahih, and some people had the, so this means the other ones are not as sahih, they're not as effective. And al-Hakim's like, no, that's not true. I'm going to show you by writing this collection the ahadith that would have met al-Bukhari and Muslim's criterion of sahih, but they just didn't include them in their collections because of other stringent criterion that they had. But they still meet the conditions. But he never got to finish the mission. So who finished it? The Ad-Dumi al-Maqdisi. And that's why he is, and some people say he's greater than al-Hakim. That's a huge thing to say. Because al-Hakim is the 400s. So for someone to say that the Ad-Dumi al-Maqdisi, who died 643, is greater than al-Hakim, there's a lot of muhaqqiqeen that say that. That's a huge thing to say. So when he says it's sahih and it meets the criterion of Bukhari Muslim, okay, then it does. Or if he just says, well, wafaqahu Diya, and Diya has agreed, it's like, okay, that's it then. That's it then. And he trumps al-Dhahabi. Yeah. That's huge, because these are muhaqqiqeen, that's their business. Is there another question?
Do you know the book by Imam Shami, the Bani Sahihain?
Yes, Al-Jami Bain Al-Sahihain.
Is that all the muttafaqun alayh? Is it from both Bukhari and Muslim?
Very good question. So the question about Imam Salih al-Shami's book, Al-Jami Bain Al-Sahihain. Now, Imam Salih al-Shami, hafidhahullah, he's one of my favorite living muhaddithin. What he decided to do to answer this question is, we have to go back. He decided that there has to be a way to make ahadith that are accessible to the layman more accessible. So he looked and he saw Abdul Baqi Fuad. Now, Fuad Abdul Baqi, he tried to do something really noble, which was to have a one schematic structure for the hadith collections to where they're all numbered. There's just a Dewey Decimal System for all the hadith collections. He was able to do it for Muslim and Al-Bukhari, and then he tried to do it for the Sihah and other collections, but he died before he was able to complete the task. Publishing houses at the time that were becoming more popular, where they started to see books less as a treasury of knowledge and more as, we could make a lot of money from this, they started to just publish in great abundance. The problem was they weren't adhering to that numbering system with a structure. So it created a whole lot of confusion. Imam Salih al-Shami, hafidhahullah, what he's tried to do is to come behind that and to reform Imam Abdul Baqi's system and say, okay, we're going to reform this and we're going to start it afresh and anew so all these run together. So he's created 9 units for the hadith collections. All right, there are going to be 9 units running from Aqidah to Adab and Good Action. And things are going to be filed under this system. They're going to be filed. So he's gone through, he finished the Sihah Sitta, they're done. He got through the Musnad, the Muwatta, Ad-Dumi. Now, there are 500 collections, but he's gotten through, I'd say, about 30 of them. It's something that he probably won't see through in his lifetime. But the people after him will finish the job, because what he's put in place is huge. Now, his Al-Jami' Bain al-Sahihain is he went through Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Now, Al-Bukhari and Muslim, when they narrate, they'll sometimes narrate a hadith that repeat, because there's repetition, because there's different Sahaba repeating. So what he did is he said, what I'll do is the ahadith that repeat, I will not have the ahadith that repeat. I will just have the ahadith that they share in common. And whenever there's a repetition, so you'll have what's muttafaqun alayh, you'll have what's uniquely narrated by Bukhari, what's uniquely narrated by Muslim. And whenever there's repetitions, I'll have a footnote that'll say, and these companions have repeated the hadith. But I won't repeat the hadith over and over again because it takes up paper, does other things like that. Then in addition to that, I'll include the footnotes that Al-Bukhari and Muslim in their introductions that they put in their collections that give you an aid to helping you understand it, which was epic. So, in looking at it, this is an example. So, in looking at it, you have a hadith that's listed, and then the qaf is muttafaqun alayh. He's got his numbering system. These are the notes that a Shami will put either for explaining the hadith, the breakdown of the hadith, right? And then it tells you where it's from. It's from Muslim. That's uniquely Bukhari. That's uniquely Muslim. These are the ta'liqat from Al-Bukhari himself. So Al-Bukhari and Muslim, where he gives ta'liqat that help further explain the hadith, which are these. So these are Bukhari's notes himself to help you understand the hadith and everything else, the numbering system, everything else. And this is what his goal was, to complete this, to have the ahadith printed fully with how they were intended by the said authors, the collectors. And he's gone through and done that, because a lot of the publishing houses, again, they were looking at how do we make money from this. Then they found that it was profitable to sell Arabic books and Muslim books, it became a free-for-all. And so you have scholars that put out the books, but then you'll have publishing houses, because they have more money behind them, they'll put out the books. So then you have complications. So one of the printings, so the printings of the Lum'ah, most of those were in error, because they're mixing, because there's 3 riwayat of the Lum'ah, and they're like mixing between them and everything else. So it's like, it creates all this confusion. Then they misprint like fiqh books, or they misprint like a statement, like Sheikh Faris ibn Falih al-Khazarji, hafidhullah, he's been going through al-adab al-shar'iyya, and he pointed out something in one of the printed copies that they've put taraffudu, but it should be taraffubu, but it should be tarakkubu. It should be that, right? He said, correct your edition and pay attention to the manuscripts, which I was like, let me check mine. I was like, no, mine's sound, because it was printed through the judiciary of Arabiya, which those are a bunch of fuqaha, right? So they're checking on these type of things. My Al-Iqna' is printed by Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Subki, which is a faqih. This is printed by ulama. The others are printed by, my copy of Al-Mughni with Sharh al-Kabir is a sheikh that works with manuscripts. That's why it's not the publishing houses, it's the scholars that are behind it, right? It's who's behind this. But when you have publishing houses that are doing it for, say, money or things like this, it creates these problems. So now, to address the second part of the question. So, Al-Jami' Bain al-Sahihain is gathering together the hadith that are agreed upon by Bukhari and Muslim. So you're literally getting both Bukhari and Muslim in one place, without the repetition hadith, which will be indicated in a line. Listen, these companions narrated the same hadith several times. And you're getting the ta'liqat that both have put. What's muttafaqun alayh, there's a little qaf in the corner. What Muslim is uniquely written in the corner. And what Bukhari is uniquely written in the corner. And it's there. So, and you have an exhaustive index. Volume 5 is just an index. So if you're looking for any hadith in there, like you're like, okay, innamal a'mal, flip through, there it is. Volume so-and-so, this, all right. You can go flipping through and find. It's like, it's an absolute gem. He's done tashkil as well on all the ahadith as well. And then he'll sometimes have a note. Now this hadith could be read this way, or it could be read this way, right? So there's more than one way to read the hadith. And he's done this. He finished the Sihah, then he's done the 9, then he's done. So he's been going about his way, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it possible for him to create this, to do this massive undertaking, which is one of the most important aspects of tajdeed in the last maybe 100 years in the field of hadith. It's been very important what he's done, because and the paper that it's on is high quality paper, and it's golden, which makes it what? Easier to read and memorize. So when families want to, so Jami' Bain as-Sahihain, if a family is reading through this and say, okay, we're just going to read through the hadith and get benefit every day. We'll just take benefit, read through it every day. They can do it. Right? That's what he's done. Is so he's made learning devotional ahadith a more accessible and reachable goal for Muslims today, and for students of hadith as well. He's also made it possible. Now, here's something important though. For students of hadith, it seems like these books are set up a certain way, Brother Abu Ja'far. Yes, they are. These books he's set up according to the curriculum of Hanbali fiqh. So the way the chapters are laid out, you'll notice, hey, this is laid out like the Umdah. That's because it's based on how the Umdah is laid out. So those of us that have done Hanbali fiqh, hey, listen, it's what happens. He's laid it out according to that and the structure of that, because these guys are a bunch of Hanbalis. So Ad-Dumi, Abu Dawood, Bukhari, Muslim, a bunch of Hanbalis. So he's laid out, he's laid about, and if they're not, they are Hanbali adjacent. So he's kind of laid it out. Now, for those that are not, that are going through Jami' Bain as-Sahihain or Zawaid as-Sunan and others that, it's difficult to get the hang of, it'll probably take 4 months or so for people who aren't to get adjusted to it. But for those that understand the layout of the Umdah, the Ahadith, it's pretty much built on the same methodology. That's why usually the translations I've had, under the section on a note about translation, I have a small section about Salih Shami in there, and then how many ahadith are in each of the books he's done, Jami' Bain as-Sahihain, as this many, to show you the track that he's following. Because when I saw it, I was like, it was like a grid that fits exactly over. This fits exactly over what? Wait a minute, he's basing it on this? Well, yeah. Because it makes sense, because those books are not just books of ahkam, but they're loaded with a hadith, and those hadith are all from the sihah, so it just makes it easier to just follow that track. And then so what he does is, his layout is, he has the book set up to where he'll have the book set up, and it's set up based upon maqasid, which he calls units, right? And so the maqasid will be, the first one will be aqidah. So the book will be, so all the ahadith that are connected to what you're supposed to believe, everything else, he'll lay out according to that. The second qasid is ilm and its sources. So any ahadith to do with that will be broken down and laid out. Then the next qasid will be ibadat. So anything to do with ibadah, everything will be laid out. Then the next one from that will be ibadah, so have maqasid, aqidah, ilm, ibadat, muamalat, the prophets, seerah, history. So they're all laid out in these units that he's organized them in. So when you're studying them, now if you want to go back and study the original Bukhari and Muslim, they're laid out differently to this, but this is laid out to where you can study it according to theme. All right, I just want to study the ahadith that talk about what we're supposed to believe. Okay, well, you can. Look, it's right here. I just want to study the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim that are about this. Okay, here they are. They're right here. They're all here, but they're just organized under a unit system for easier accessing by hadith students. Now, when you go to the original Bukhari and Muslim, you'll find those hadith in there, but they'll be laid out differently, right? And that's what he's done. So Imam Salih Shami has really done something. It's similar to what his brother Abdul Rahman did in fiqh. Abdul Rahman Shami, hafidhahullah, has kind of revolutionized fiqh in a way from, say, the past 150 years. He's done the same thing as what his brother's done, but just in fiqh, to where he's tried to make it easier to follow, unifying things, putting stuff together. They really have done a massive work for the ummah, just in terms of making fiqh more accessible and hadith more accessible. Any other questions? Yes.
Just to add on to that question, is there a specific reason why it's taken until the times where Salih al-Shami works on it to get this work started? Why has it been paused for such a long time? Is there a reason, or is it to do with the memorization of a hadith has weakened, so we need a referencing system to help with the students upcoming to memorize?
Okay, so the question is why in this time, the numbering, and why this was done, not before. Alhamdulillah. What you mentioned about people's hifz weakening, that is true, right? And that's why these things are required. So with people's knowledge lessening, you need to create structures in place to deal with when that happens, right? People's knowledge lessening. Also, the fact that there was so much more confusion because of the original good intention that Fuad Abdul-Baqi had. And with more publishing houses, then you have fake hadith scholars who also spread the nonsense that happened, which made it even more difficult. So you have some companies that go into business. Well, a book company will see that, whoa, look at how much al-Bukhari Muslim selling every year. Or look at how much more Fatawa Taqi ibn Taymiyyah is selling every year. Because those are huge sellers, whether people like it or not. And it's not just Salafis buying it. No, Majmu' Fatawa is bought by serious researchers. When I was in the United States, Ann Arbor, Michigan, the Kuffar have they have most of Taqi ibn Taymiyyah's works. The Kuffar study him. The Kuffar have studied Taqi ibn Taymiyyah. Nimrud Horvitz has studied the Hanbali Madhab for like 40 years. He's a Jewish guy. He studied the Madhab for like 40 years. And assessing its history and all this other stuff, man. Someone sent me a document. It's like 90 pages long. And it's an introductory look at the Madhab of Imam Ahmed Rahimahullah. And it's by Nimrud Horvitz, some Jewish guy, man. So, there are kuffar who have spent their time studying this for research purposes. There's stuff Taqi ibn Taymiyyah has said scientifically that is of importance. Stuff he said about circumnavigation. Like his Majmu' Fatawa is filled, like all types of stuff is in there, right? Book companies saw this, book publishers, and so they started publishing. Now, it creates confusion because are you going to number the fatwa? Are you going to put them under some type of stuff? It was chaos. And then you're dealing with the sources of Islam, Bukhari, Muslim, Urdu. These are the sources. These are ahadith. But people would just publish them, and they're like, "Oh man, look at all these notes. What are all these notes? That's going to cost too much paper. Let's just delete those and just put it out." So they put it out without the introductory notes. They put it out without the ta'liqat. They put it out without the source referencing. And then which was really, now this happened in my lifetime, and it angered me, where they said, well, it takes too much printing sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's too much of a print. So what we'll do is we'll either remove it, or sometimes they'll shorten and just put a sawd. Say, hey, wait a minute, just put a sawd. Or my favorite, in a bad sense, is sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so what happened is you started finding a lot of Arabs started saying sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sawd, lam, ayn, sin, lam. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you'll find a lot of Arabs, because they saw it in print like that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it got shortened. Rather than sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it got shortened. So this happened. So other Imams of Hadith, Salih Shami, Muhammad Musa ibn Adam, the great Ethiopian, other muhaddithin saw this and were like, no, this can't be. We have to combat this. Because you can go to the printers and say, you guys have to stop printing these types of books. You can tell them that. Oh, okay, yeah. And they might even make Toba or whatever else. But there'll be some other publisher who's like, all right, well, he's gone now. I can move in. And they move in. So there's money in this. So because there's money in it, there's a corruption that comes in there. So you have to deal with that, right? It's just like the same thing of people. And then you have people improperly printing books. So there'll be someone who'll be in a manuscript department and think, ooh, this manuscript, if I print this could get a lot of money. But they don't know how to read manuscripts. So they now bring errors that they had from reading the manuscript into printed Arabic. And then they create these new problems. So now the people that read that printed text read a misunderstanding of a word or a few words in Arabic, and it spreads everywhere. Right? And this happened a lot, to where there were a section of some Arabs from my generation that thought that Imam Abu Hanifa only knew 14 ahadith. And then it's come into English. Why? Well, because Al-Mawsili has a history text about Jarh and Ta'dil. And the Jarh and Ta'dil text, when they mention Imam Abu Hanifa's contribution to Jarh and Ta'dil, they're saying that there are 14 ahadith that Imam Abu Hanifa narrated. Not that he only knew 14. Because when we're talking about Jarh and Ta'dil and hadith narrating, we're talking about sitting in a hadith class and narrating a hadith. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah wa radiyallahu anhu, he didn't sit in classes like that because he had a panel of 40 qadis and he was passing rulings constantly. So he had memorized, obviously, the hadith that an absolute mujtahid needs. But his narration in terms of sitting down and narrating from books, that's not how he narrated. Because that wasn't the environment he was in. That's not what Al-Kufa was like. So when you look at the Kufans, where you say, oh, well, the hadith majlis of the Kufans, how come the hadith majlis, there's very few ahadith narrated? Not because they don't know them. It's because how they went about giving out the hadith and explaining them was different. Because the Kufan majlis is primarily concerning itself with fatwa. So if you look in their fatwa majlis, there's all these hadith being discussed. Exactly. Now, when you look in the Basran hadith majlis, it's loads, it's full. Well, why? Because they're hadith first. And what comes out of that will be the fatwa. Oh, we noticed their fatwa majlis, there aren't that many fatwa passed. What, does that mean there weren't muftis? Does that mean they weren't fuqaha? No, it's their methods were different. So brothers read that and thought, oh, this means Abu Hanifa only knew 14 hadith. No, it means one of the few times he was in a hadith majlis where he sat down and narrated from a hadith. There were 14 instances where he sat and narrated in the same capacity we might recognize in Al-Basra or Al-Hijaz. That didn't mean he only knew those hadith. That's nonsense. But brothers, that they just took that and then they just ran with it. And then sometimes you get the publishing houses, they start putting their own taliqat. It's like, whoa, we put this in here for your benefit. Or sometimes they'll print, like when they printed Fath al-Bari, they put their own taliqat in. Then the Al Saud government said, yeah, we want to put in some notes for one of our sheikhs as well. Yeah, go ahead. And then sometimes they print like Al-Jami' al-Saghir by Imam Suyuti. Someone plagiarized that and said that he wrote it. And Imam Suyuti wrote it. And then spent the opening unit attacking Imam Suyuti. I was like, well, subhanAllah, why is it? Right, this is the fitna that was going on. So when we were first studying in the realm of hadith, this is the thing that our teachers were telling us. And so you have to be careful, pay attention to where you're buying. If they didn't tell us what printing house they were from, they'd say, go get the book. And it was the area in Bayswater and this man in Bayswater, he loved books, but he loved Arabic literature. He was a very honest man. He wasn't a scholar, but he loved Arabic literature. And it broke my heart because I went back to London recently to see where he was, and he doesn't have that shop anymore. But I used to love going there. You could ask him any question about Arabic literature. He hadn't memorized the book or anything like that, but he knew, okay, can you get Imam Suyuti's Al-Jami' al-Saghir? Yes. Do you want the Kabir or the Saghir? The Saghir. Okay, I can get that. Okay, and he'd get it, and he'd bring it in and say, okay, this was printed in this year by this man, and the editor was this faqih or whatever else. Or he'd say, it was edited by this person. He said, I don't think he was a scholar. I don't know if you should buy it. Stand here and read. He said, listen, take it away. If you find any problems, bring it back. You don't have to pay for it. But if you find that it's okay, come back and pay me for it. And so we had like almost like an interlibrary loan system. That man was so muttaqi. He was a beautiful human being. Beautiful human being. We used to sometimes have to argue with him. Listen, I told you this book is good. I found that I need to pay you. No, I don't remember that. No, you do remember. Let me pay you the money. So he was just he had such taqwa because he loved the deen, but he also loved the sources of the deen, one of which was Arabic. He appreciated that. And so that's why it's important that when you get kutub, that they're from not only the right ulama, the relevant ulama, but the right sourcing and the right things, so that way you have the finished article in front of you, right? And Sheikh Faddis went on and linked about this one day where he found some intrusive footnotes. He said, now look at this. Why they do like he just subhanAllah, he went off about a minute or two. He's like, they're not being truthful to the text. Do you want to do this? Write your own book. Don't put your own notes in here. They've got nothing to do. They don't clarify the text or anything. You're trying to attack the author. You're trying to make yourself a sheikh on the back of this shit. Get out of here with this. SubhanAllah. These are the things that you have to deal with. And it's because there's money in it. Because there's money in it. So you have to be wise, look at things very carefully, and understand that's why this issue came about. Is scholars are contending with other people who are taking their life's legacy, making money off it. Because they're just thinking about, man, there's huge money in this. And just making money off their legacy. And it's not unexpected, it's just disappointing. Because these people have names like Muhammad and Ahmed and things like that. But they're just like, yeah, we're here to just make money off of it. You know, as a final point, the kuffar, if they print Arabic books, because sometimes they do, the best printing of Ibn al-Jawzi's Akhbar al-Sifat is by a kafir named Bridel. In the introduction to the book, he said, I have faithfully reproduced the polymath and reviver of the Islamic religion, Ibn al-Jawzi's Akhbar al-Sifat, without intrusive notes or any legible footnotes other than with respect to the different manuscripts I have consulted. Please find the completed work in front of you. I was like, now you see this? He had the ayah citations in brackets. This guy's not even Muslim. He's not messed with the text. He's not done anything. He gave a 40-page biography of Imam al-Jawzi. I have taken this from the Tabaqat al-Hanabila from the source of, I was like, subhanallah. Really? Ibn al-Jawzi, it's difficult to put into words his scholarly footprint. I was like, it is. This man has gone to that. Subhanallah. That's something that, you know, these publishing houses can take away. Sometimes it's not just the calligraphy that's enough. It's, are you being truthful? Right? Because you do things like I mentioned before about the man that tampered with the metin. You know, it's a real big fitna. It's a real big fitna to tamper with Qallawi's metin. People start deciding, we've decided what's best for you. We said, no. Let me decide. If this is haram or it's shirk or you shouldn't do this, okay, listen, let me read the Qasida Burda for myself. And if I find anything funky, then I will not read it. If I find something untoward in Dalail al-Khairah, let me write Dalail al-Khairah. You don't edit it for me and then don't chew my vegetables for me and say, look, I've got vegetables for you. This is wrong for you to do. You let me decide that. I can decide for myself and then say, yeah, I don't want to read that. But these are really serious issues. And the scholars of hadith, the scholars of fiqh, the scholars of i'tiqad, scholars of Arabic language, they all have to contend with this because these publishing houses are all printing those books, right? And then there'll be slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will just translate something that there's some ikhtilaf in, like Ibn Arabi. I never thought I'd see the day that Ibn Arabi, Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi's books are in English. Like, what's this doing in English? Allahu Akbar. Why is that? Because those books are normally studied with someone, and it's a very, like Ibn Arabi's book, his legacy is very rarefied. Why would you translate that and say not Ghazali? Abdul Qadir Jilani, everyone's agreed on him. There's no issue with that. Imam Ghazali, there's no argument with that. You want to translate good books of the soul. Okay, there's your stuff right there. But you know there's ikhtilaf about Rumi or Ibn Arabi, or you know that ikhtilaf is there based upon ambiguous statements that can be taken out of context. You don't go from the decisive to the ambiguous. Right? If I ask you, what's an ayah that proves that intoxicants are permissible, you don't say Qul huwallahu ahad. Say He Allah is one. Like, yeah, that's true in a general sense. You believe Allah is one, you won't drink. Yeah, in a general sense. But there's a decisive ayah though that says, Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah 90, don't take intoxicants. Like Qul huwallahu ahad. It's like, yeah, you can actually, from an Usuli standpoint, I can see why you are, yeah. No, but that's that's not as decisive on that subject as Surah Al-Ma'idah 5 Surah 90, right? And this is what's happened. So the agreed upon people of Tasawwuf, Sheikh Ahmed al-Rifai, Abu Hamid Ghazali, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, like these are, no one argues about. The Ummah has met them with acceptance. You wouldn't go to that and say someone who's some of their works, or the said individual there's ikhtilaf about. You wouldn't do that. The books that you look at are the ones that have been handed down over and over and over again without reservation. No one has reservations about Ibn Ghazali. It's just handed down. Yes, if I looked at Ihya Ulumuddin and benefited, would that be okay? Yeah. If I went to Al-Ghunya, would that, Al-Ghunya is the equivalent of Ihya. It was just written by Shaykh al-Qadir Jilani. That's it. It's the equivalent. So okay, well, if I did this, would that be okay? Yeah, it'd be okay. Like I can know that if somebody just goes into any of the books of Abdul Qadir Jilani and says, I just pick this up and start reading it, I don't have any issue. My only issue would be, I think you should follow an order, because that would be more helpful for you, more beneficial. The Ghunya, I think you should look at it from cover to cover, because that's how it's more useful for you. But that would be the only thing, and just in terms of order. But I wouldn't have any issue if someone said, yeah, so-and-so's reading Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, his Fath al-Bari, or his al-Isaba, okay? Or at-Tamyiz, okay? Because there's no issue. But if someone told me, yeah, he's reading Rumi by himself, wait a minute, what? Right? He's reading Ibn Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi by himself, wait a minute, what? Right? That would concern me, right? Because I don't know what he's reading. What's he reading? Fusus al-Hikam. No. Tell him put it away. Tell him put it away. He's reading Futuhat al-Makkiyah. No. Put that down, man. Put that down. He's reading Rumi's. He's reading his Mathnawi. No. Put that away, man. Not because Rumi's no good, but there's some ambiguity. There's argumentation about some of the stuff. Some of the scholars discuss this. Don't mess with that, right? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his afiyah and his protection. So we say, Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk innahu ghafurur rahim wa la ilaha illa Allah. Wassalamu alaykum.